As people in the town of Bedford continue fighting for a passenger train station, we're hearing candid comments from two state employees who have influence over whether the project will get funding. Their statements prompted a human resources investigation at the state agency that oversees Virginia rail projects. It all started with a voicemail left for WDBJ7's Tim Saunders. So Tim, why were those state employees calling you?
We were working on a story related to the proposed Bedford station, Jane. The employees were trying to leave a short message asking me to call them back, but they forgot to hang up the phone. What followed was more than 2 minutes of candid and at times explicit remarks about the Bedford proposal and a number of statewide leaders. The voicemail was left on April 15th by Michael McLaughlin, a man who manages rail initiatives for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. He was joined by Chris Smith, the agency's Director of Policy, Communications, and Legislative Affairs. Virginia law doesn't allow us to broadcast the voicemail because the men didn't realize they were being recorded. We can tell you what was said. The pair left a 25-second message asking WDBJ7 to call them back before attempting to hang up the phone. Instead of hanging up, they began talking about the Long Bridge, a span that crosses the Potomac River. It's the only bridge that carries freight and passenger trains between Virginia and Washington, D.C., and state leaders say it's in desperate need of an upgrade to accommodate the growing amount of rail traffic along the East Coast. Work to address the Long Bridge is estimated to cost more than $1 billion, significantly more than the $10 million requested to build the Bedford station, a platform that would allow Amtrak riders to stop between Roanoke and Lynchburg. Advocates say the Bedford project would have a significant economic impact by bringing more tourists and business people to our region while boosting ridership for our local Amtrak service. In the voicemail, McLaughlin can be heard saying, "If we have to pay for Bedford Station instead of Long Bridge, then we're expletive, because do you know how many other things we're going to have to pay for around the state?" Smith responds saying, "We're expletive on a bigger scale with Norfolk Southern." McLaughlin replies, "I thought Norfolk Southern doesn't even want it," followed by Smith, who says, "That's what I don't understand about Shannon's budget. There are so many bigger things at play with Norfolk Southern right now. Why would you want to expletive them off?" The Shannon he's talking about is Shannon Valentine, Virginia's Secretary of Transportation. During her time as a delegate in the General Assembly, she played a leading role in bringing the Northeast Regional Amtrak service to our region. In a statement, Valentine told WDBJ7, "I remain passionate about passenger rail service. Across all transportation agencies, I'm committed to excellence and expect that transportation recommendations and decisions are based on evidence, policies, and procedures, and reflect our responsibility to the citizens we serve. Anything less is unacceptable." The voicemail continued, with McLaughlin bringing up Virginia's former Secretary of Transportation, Aubrey Lane. Still talking about the Bedford proposal, McLaughlin says, "This is where Aubrey would be like expletive kill it." Later in the message, Smith said of the Bedford station, "If the Democrats are in the majority in the fall, we play them off of Roanoke's delegation, John Edwards, Sam Rasool. They'll shut it down." Smith was talking about State Senator John Edwards and Delegate Sam Rasool. We played the recording for both men, who said they aren't concerned about employees of a state agency trying to influence them politically.
I've always supported Amtrak stopping in Bedford. It'd be good for ridership for Amtrak, it'd be good for Bedford, it'd be good for tourism.
I'm fully committed to increasing passenger rail all across that line, including Bedford, Roanoke, on into Blacksburg and beyond.
Before WDBJ7 approached anyone about the recording, we contacted McLaughlin and Smith in an email that copied their supervisor, Jennifer Mitchell, the director of Virginia's Department of Rail and Public Transportation. McLaughlin and Smith did not respond. Instead, we received a phone call from Mitchell, who later invited us to Richmond so that she and her agency's human resources manager could listen to the recording.
It absolutely does not reflect the way that we at DRPT do business.
Mitchell said the recording was handled as a personnel matter, but was not able to comment on whether any action was taken against McLaughlin or Smith.
We hold our staff to very high standards, and in my experience, all of our staff are very professional. They operate with integrity and transparency to the public that we serve.
Now, we first met with Mitchell about this recording 2 weeks ago. Since then, she's reached out to the people mentioned in the recording. She also drove to Bedford last week for a face-to-face meeting with the leaders advocating for the train station. Jane, the people in Bedford say there's been a very positive outcome. We will tell you what that is and how the agency is working to give the Bedford station a closer look. That's coming up in part 2 of our story tonight on WDBJ 7 at 6.
The state agency that oversees rail projects in Virginia is defending its work to evaluate a proposed train station in Bedford. At 5:30, we told you about a voicemail message left for WDBJ 7 that included some candid comments about the Bedford proposal. New at 6, WDBJ 7's Tim Saunders shows us what we've learned since the recording surfaced.
In a message accidentally left on the voicemail of a WDBJ 7 phone, Michael McLaughlin, a man who manages rail initiatives for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, can be heard talking for more than 2 minutes with his coworker Chris Smith. They used explicit terms to talk about a handful of state leaders and the proposal to build a passenger train station in Bedford. At one point, McLaughlin said, "If we have to pay for Bedford Station instead of Longbridge, then we're expletive. Because do you know how many other things we're going to have to pay for around the state?" The Long Bridge is a railroad bridge across the Potomac River that needs more than $1 billion worth of upgrades. Jennifer Mitchell is director of the DRPT and supervises the men heard in the voicemail.
It absolutely does not reflect the way that we at DRPT do business.
As a follow-up to the recording, WDBJ 7 wanted to know if the comments made by McLaughlin and Smith reflected how the agency pursues rail initiatives. At one point in the recording, the men can be heard talking about several state lawmakers.
We have a very good relationship with the General Assembly and with other elected officials across the state, and we certainly respect the role that they play in representing their constituents.
Mitchell said her agency has given serious consideration to the idea of building a train station in Bedford. She gave WDBJ 7 a timeline, detailing her department's efforts to research the Bedford proposal over a 6-year period.
We have to look at all of the needs statewide and balance the cost of any project against those statewide needs.
The biggest need, according to Mitchell, is the Long Bridge. Funding that project will take priority for several years. For that reason, Mitchell said her agency will not recommend funding this year for Bedford's $10 million request to build a train station, but discussions will continue. Last Wednesday, Mitchell traveled here to Bedford to meet face-to-face with leaders who've been working on the train station proposal. That meeting was scheduled before the voicemail came to light. During their meeting, Mitchell told Bedford leaders that her staff will recommend funding for a planning study to evaluate the potential cost and impacts of a Bedford station. They're also looking into the possibility of restoring a bus service that would shuttle Amtrak customers from Bedford to the train station in Lynchburg. The moves, according to Mitchell, are designed to keep the Bedford proposal on track for future funding. Tim Saunders, WDBJ 7.
After WDBJ 7 contacted the Department of Rail and Public Transportation about that voicemail, agency leaders launched an internal investigation. Mitchell said the matter was handled by Human Resources, but she was not able to say whether any action was taken against the men who left the message.